The discarded princess the palace was quiet, too quiet for the once vibrant halls of the royal family. The grand corridors were decorated with banners of deep purple and gold, but no one walked down them anymore. The grand steps, which used to echo with the laughter of the royal family, were now filled with silence. No one came to visit her. Princess Zara sat by a large window, staring out at the stars. She could see the distant lights of other ships flying by far above her home. But she wasn't like them. The other alien species had all turned their backs on her. They saw her as weak, a broken ruler. Zara had once been the symbol of power in her empire, but now, with her disability, she was seen as nothing more than a disappointment. Her right leg, once strong and swift, was now nothing more than a twisted metal rod that barely allowed her to walk. The accident had changed everything. The great princess who had once led her people to victory was now a prisoner in her own palace, her body forever marked by scars. Her disability made her unfit to lead, and the people had forgotten her. Zara's eyes moved from the stars to a reflection in the window. She saw a woman she hardly recognized. Her hair, once vibrant and full of life, now hung limply, and the sadness in her eyes was impossible to hide. She had always been the one others looked up to, the one who was supposed to save her people. But now she was the one who needed saving, and no one seemed to care. She heard the sounds of laughter coming from outside her room. The guards, the servants, they were all talking to each other, but they never came near her. Zara had been isolated for so long that she had forgotten what it felt like to have someone truly care. It was as if the very air in the palace had become cold and distant. She thought back to the days before the accident, when she had been strong, fearless, and proud. She had led her people into battles, winning victory after victory. Her people had respected her, feared her even. They had followed her every command, and she had been their shining star. But that was all before the war, before the fall. Zara closed her eyes and breathed deeply, trying to steady herself. She had to keep her dignity. She couldn't let the others see how weak she had become. The very thought of it made her want to break down and cry, but she refused. She wouldn't let them see her like that. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction. But in her heart, she knew the truth. They didn't see her as the princess anymore. They saw her as an invalid, someone who was no longer capable of ruling. They saw her as someone who was broken beyond repair. Suddenly, the door to her room creaked open. Zara quickly wiped her eyes and turned to face whoever had entered. It was a human, one of the soldiers who had been assigned to her protection. He wasn't much older than a boy, but his eyes held a certain seriousness that she couldn't ignore. "Princess Zara," he said softly, his voice steady and kind. "You are needed in the council chambers. The other leaders are waiting for you." Zara felt a pang of bitterness. The council, they had always been the ones to discuss her future, deciding what was best for the empire, as if they had the right to determine her worth. She had been excluded from their meetings for weeks now, and now they wanted her presence. Was it out of pity? Or was it because they had no choice but to recognize her as their leader again? She forced a smile and nodded. "I will be there shortly," she replied, her voice colder than she had intended. The young soldier hesitated, then spoke again, his tone gentle. "You don't have to do this alone, princess. You're stronger than you think. You don't have to let them decide your fate." Zara stared at him, surprised by his words. No one had spoken to her like that in so long. No one had looked at her like she was still someone worth fighting for. She had forgotten what it felt like to be seen for who she was, rather than what she had become. For a moment, Zara felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps there was still someone who believed in her. But then the weight of her reality came crashing back. She was no longer the princess who commanded armies or made decisions for her people. She was just a broken leader, too weak to do anything. With a sigh, Zara nodded, standing slowly, her crutches supporting her weight. The soldier held the door open for her, but she didn't meet his gaze as she walked past him. She couldn't. Not yet. Not until she found a way to prove that she wasn't just a discarded princess as she made her way through the empty halls. The feeling of loneliness settled back into her chest. She was alone in a world that no longer saw her as worthy. And for the first time, she wasn't sure if she would ever find her way back. But maybe, just maybe, someone would come to see her for who she truly was. Not as the broken princess, but as the ruler she had once been. The invitation Princess Zara sat in her chambers, the quiet hum of the palace far too loud in her ears. The silence had become her constant companion, a reminder of her loneliness. She had spent years in isolation, her only company being the cold walls of the palace and the whispers of the council. But today, things were different. The council had called for her presence. They had invited her to attend a grand gala. The invitation had been delivered in a formal envelope, sealed with the royal insignia. But to Zara, it felt more like a cruel joke. She had been excluded from everything for so long, and now, out of nowhere, they wanted her at the center of attention. It was almost too much to bear. She hadn't been to a gala in years. The last time she had attended one, she had been a symbol of power, a leader among her people. Now, she was broken, and the thought of walking into a room full of people who had long ago turned their backs on her made her stomach turn. The decision was not an easy one. Zara stood in front of the mirror, examining herself, seeing only the scars and the twisted metal that replaced her leg. She had been the one to lead her people with pride, to win battles, and to conquer worlds. Now, she was reduced to someone who couldn't even walk without help. The princess's reflection stared back at her with a mix of anger and sadness. She wanted to refuse the invitation to stay locked away in her chambers where no one could see her weakness. But something inside her stirred. She had always been a fighter, and maybe, just maybe, this was the time to prove that she still had some fight left in her. Zara straightened her back and gripped the edge of the vanity. Determination flooding. Through her veins, she would go to the gala. She would show them that she wasn't just a broken princess. She would show them that she could still be strong, even if it was just for one night. The event was held in the grand ballroom of the palace, a place that had once been filled with laughter and music, a place where she had danced and mingled with the leaders of other species. Now, it felt foreign to her, like a place she didn't belong. As Zara arrived at the ballroom, doors were opened for her by the guards. The grand space was filled with alien dignitaries and leaders from across the galaxy. They all turned to look as she entered, their eyes cold and dismissive. Zara could feel the weight of their gaze, their judgment heavy in the air. It was as if they were all waiting for her to fail. Her crutches clicked against the floor as she walked. Each step, a reminder of the disability that had taken so much from her. The room seemed to stretch out before her, and for a moment, Zara almost turned back. But she kept moving forward, her head held high, her eyes focused on the crowd. She didn't know what she was expecting, but she certainly didn't expect him. The human soldier. He stood at the far side of the room, a figure out of place among the alien dignitaries. His uniform was simple but clean, his posture confident. He was tall and broad-shouldered, and when their eyes met, a spark of recognition passed between them. Zara couldn't explain it. But in that moment, she felt something shift inside her. It was as if, for the first time in years, someone truly saw her not as a broken princess, but as a person. The human soldier made his way through the crowd, and Zara's heart skipped a beat. She didn't know why he was walking toward her, but she felt her breath catch in her throat as he stopped. In front of her, the ballroom seemed to fade away, and for a brief moment, it was just the two of them. "Princess Zara," he said, his voice steady and respectful. It's an honor to meet you." Zara blinked, surprised by the sincerity in his words. "Honor is mine," she replied, her voice softer than she had intended. He smiled, though it was more of a calm understanding than a broad grin. "I know this must be difficult for you, but you don't have to face it alone." Zara's heart tightened. No one had spoken to her like that in so long. No one had ever treated her like she was more than her disability, more than her scars. She didn't know how to respond, so she simply nodded. "Would you care to dance?" he asked, his hand extending. Toward her, Zara's first instinct was to refuse. She couldn't dance not like she once had. The thought of being the center of attention, all eyes on her, was terrifying. But something inside her told her to take the chance. She had come this far, hadn't she? With a slow, deliberate movement, Zara placed her hand in his. His touch was warm, comforting, and she found herself following him onto the dance floor. The music began, a soft, melodic tune that filled the space with a sense of calm. As they began to move together, Zara felt a sense of relief wash over her. The weight of the room, the judgment, seemed to fade as they danced. The human didn't. Rush her didn't make her feel awkward. He simply guided her, step by step, letting her lead when she could and supporting her when she needed it. For the first time in a long time, Zara felt ... normal. She wasn't the broken princess, the one people whispered about. She was just a woman dancing with a man who saw her for who she was, not for what she had become. The gala went on around them, but Zara didn't care. For that brief moment, nothing else mattered. She wasn't alone anymore. She wasn't discarded. The human had asked her to dance, and for the first time in years, she felt like she could truly be herself. As the song came to an end, Zara realized something. Maybe, just maybe, she wasn't done yet. The first dance, the music swirled around the grand ballroom, its soft, lilting melody mingling with the quiet murmur of the guests. Zara could feel the eyes of the room on her, but in that moment, she didn't care. She was no longer the discarded princess, the one with the broken body and shattered dignity. She was simply a woman, dancing. The human soldier's hand was firm and steady in hers, guiding her through the gentle steps of the dance. His touch wasn't just physical, it was reassuring, as though he had no fear of her disability, no judgment about the scars that marked her body. She had grown used to being treated differently, to being the one who was avoided or looked at with pity. But this man, he saw her for what she could be, not what she had become. Zara's leg, her twisted metallic limb, was heavy with each step, but the soldier never faltered. He kept the rhythm slow and easy, making sure she was comfortable with each movement. His presence, calm and grounded, gave her a sense of security she hadn't felt in years. It was as if the weight of her body, the weight of her past, no longer held her back. For the first time in a long time, Zara forgot about the pain that gnawed at her every day. The constant ache in her leg, the weariness in her heart, none of it seemed to matter as she danced. She felt lighter, freer, as though the dance was a way to shed her old skin. For a few precious moments, she was not the princess who had fallen from grace. She was just a woman who had found something beautiful in the midst of her struggles. As they moved across the floor, the world outside the dance seemed to fade away. Zara didn't hear the whispers of the council or the murmurs of the onlookers. She didn't feel the weight of their judgment. She only felt the warmth of the soldier's hand, the gentle rhythm of their dance, and the undeniable pull of something unspoken between them. She glanced up at him, meeting his steady gaze. There was no pity in his eyes, no sympathy. He wasn't treating her like she was fragile. He wasn't trying to protect her, to fix her. He was simply with her, in the moment, as an equal. And that made all the difference. "You're a good dancer," Zara said quietly, breaking the silence between them. Her voice was soft, almost hesitant. But it carried a sincerity she couldn't hide. The soldier smiled, a small but genuine expression that made Zara's heart skip a beat. "I'm just following your lead," he replied, his voice warm. "You're the one showing me how it's done." Zara's chest tightened at his words. She had never been one to take compliments easily, especially not when she felt so broken. But there was something about the way he said it so simply, so honestly, that made her feel seen. Not for the scars on her body or the weakness in her leg, but for the strength inside her that she had buried beneath the years of isolation and pain. They continued to dance. Each step a reminder of how far Zara had come. She had once been the princess who led armies and conquered worlds, the one everyone looked up to with awe. But that had all faded. Her disability had taken that from her. She had been cast aside, forgotten, until now. The music played on, a soft, melodic tune that seemed to echo the unspoken emotions between them. Zara felt herself letting go, her guard slowly lowering with each step. For the first time in so long, she wasn't afraid to be vulnerable. She wasn't afraid to be herself, flaws and all. But as much as the dance brought her comfort, it also brought a pang of sadness. Zara knew the truth. The world around her had changed. She couldn't go back to who she was before, no matter how much she wanted to. She had to face the reality of her disability, of the life she now led. No matter how much she wished for the strength to be the ruler she once was, she could never escape what had happened. Still, there was a part of her that refused to give up. She wouldn't let the past define her. She wouldn't let her disability control her future. She would take each step forward, even if it was slow, even if it was difficult. And maybe, just maybe, she could find a way to rebuild her life. Piece by piece. The dance ended, but Zara didn't immediately pull away. She stood there, in the center of the ballroom, breathing in the moment. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like a burden. She didn't feel like the broken princess. She simply felt ... alive. The soldier stepped back, giving her space, but his hand still rested lightly on her waist. "Thank you," he said quietly, his voice holding a deeper meaning than the words themselves. Zara looked at him, her heart beating a little faster. "No, thank you," she whispered, a soft smile tugging at her lips. "I didn't know I could still feel like this." His eyes softened, and for a brief moment, she saw something in them she hadn't seen in anyone else's eyes in years. Admiration. "Maybe you've just forgotten how strong you really are," he said, his voice low and sincere. Zara looked away for a moment, the weight of his words settling in. Could she be strong again? Could she find a way to stand tall, even with the weight of her disability holding her down? For the first time, she wasn't sure. But she knew one thing. For certain, she wasn't alone anymore. And that, more than anything else, gave her hope. The night's confession, the grand ballroom, had fallen into a deep hush as the last notes of music faded, and the guests began to return to their quiet conversations. But Princess Zara remained on the floor, her thoughts a whirlwind of emotion. The human soldier who had led her through their first dance stood just a few steps away, his gaze still locked on hers. The flickering lights above cast a soft glow over the room, illuminating their figures. But it felt as though everything around them had blurred into the background. The evening had been filled with laughter and glances exchanged between the alien dignitaries, but none of it had touched Zara. She had danced and spoken with the human soldier, but her mind had been elsewhere. The night, once filled with the promise of something different, now carried the weight of something she wasn't sure she could face. The truth of who she was now, and who she had once been. The soldier seemed to sense the change in her. His easy, Smile had faded into something more concerned, more understanding. He watched her as if waiting for her to speak, waiting for her to break the silence between them. Zara could feel the tension in the air, the unspoken words hanging between them. "I should go," she said softly, trying to avoid his gaze. Her voice was a mere whisper, barely carrying over the quiet murmur of the room. But she felt the need to flee, to retreat to her chambers and hide from the vulnerability she had just allowed herself to feel. This moment, this fleeting sense of being seen for more than her scars, was almost too much to bear. The soldier stepped closer, a Tess hand gently brushing against her arm. "You don't have to go," he said, his voice steady and calm, almost too calm. "Not unless you want to." Zara took a shaky breath, her eyes drifting to the floor. It felt like every part of her was shaking, her heart pounding in her chest. She had danced tonight, yes, and for those brief moments she had forgotten her disability. But the truth always found a way to resurface. It had always been there, lurking just beneath the surface. No matter how kind the soldier was, no matter how many times he had shown her respect, she couldn't escape who she had become. "I don't belong here," she whispered, her voice tight with the words she had been hiding for so long. "I'm not the princess they once admired. I'm broken. I'm nothing but a shadow of who I was." The soldier's hand rested gently on her shoulder. His touch was warm, grounding. "You are not broken," he said softly. "You may have scars, but they don't make you less than anyone else. You are still the same person you were before, Zara. Don't you see that?" She met his gaze then, her eyes filled with emotion. "How can you say that? You don't know what it's like. I was once strong, capable. People looked to me for leadership. They respected me. Now I'm nothing more than a crippled princess." The soldier's expression didn't waver. "You're still the same person. It's just ... You're not the same person you were before. You've changed. But that doesn't make you less. We all go through changes in life. You don't lose who you are because of them." Zara shook her head, the tears she had been holding back threatening to spill over. "I don't know who I am anymore. I don't even know how to lead my people, let alone stand before them. I'm a failure." "You're not a failure, Zara," the soldier said firmly. "You're just ... human. And maybe, for the first time, you're letting yourself feel the weight of what happened. You've been strong for so long, but strength isn't about pretending everything's fine. It's about accepting who you are, scars and all." Zara's breath caught in her throat. She had spent so long pretending to be strong, hiding the fear and self-doubt that plagued her every day. But now, standing in front of this man, the truth was spilling out in a way she couldn't control. She had never allowed herself to admit how broken she truly felt. It had been easier to keep it locked away, to wear the mask of the strong princess who had it all under control. For the first time, she didn't want to hide it anymore. "I've been afraid," she confessed, her voice trembling. "Afraid of being seen as weak. Afraid of letting anyone close enough to see me for who I really am." The soldier's eyes softened, and he stepped closer. His presence was steady, like a rock in the middle of a storm. "You don't have to be afraid with me," he said gently. "I'm not here to judge you, Zara. I'm here because I see the person you are beneath all of this. You're strong, not because you've never been broken, but because you've kept going despite everything. That's what makes you a leader, and that's what makes you worthy." Zara closed her eyes, overwhelmed by his words. She had never heard anyone speak to her like this before. Not her people, not the council, not even her closest allies. But here, standing with this soldier, it felt like he was the only one who truly saw her, scars and all. He didn't care about her disability. He didn't care about the image she had once projected. He saw her for who she was, now broken, yes, but still standing. And that That was more than Zara had ever dared to hope for. She opened her eyes, meeting his gaze once again. "Why?" she whispered, the question hanging in the air. "Why do you care? Why are you still here?" The soldier smiled softly. "Because I believe in you, Zara. I believe in what you can become. I believe in the strength that's still inside of you." Her chest tightened, and she fought back the tears that threatened to fall. For the first time in years, she felt a flicker of something she hadn't dared to hope for. Hope. Maybe, just maybe, she could find her way back. Not to the princess she had been, but to something stronger, something better. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel so alone, seen. The emotional battle, the palace was silent once again, but it was the kind of silence that weighed heavily on Princess Era. Her chambers, once a place of retreat, now felt like a cage. She had not slept well that night. The soldier's words kept echoing in her mind, his gentle voice a constant reminder of the truth she had long refused to face. Zara sat in front of her mirror, staring at her reflection, but the image looking back at her was not the same as the one she had grown accustomed to. She was still the princess, still the ruler of an empire, but now she wasn't sure what that meant anymore. The accident, her disability, had changed everything. She wasn't the fearless warrior who had led her people to victory. She wasn't even the princess who commanded respect. She was broken, fragile, and unsure of herself in ways she had never imagined. The soldier had been kind, yes, but kindness alone couldn't change her reality. How could she lead her people when she could barely stand on her own? How could she inspire respect when she felt so utterly lost? She rose from the chair, pacing the room, her crutches clicking against the marble floor. Her leg, the twisted metal and scarred flesh that replaced the strength she once had, was a constant reminder of everything she had lost. Each step was painful, not just physically, but emotionally. The leg didn't just weigh her down. It reminded her of the princess she once was, and how far she had fallen from that image. But as the hours passed, Zara's thoughts grew more tumultuous. The soldier's words, his unyielding belief in her, gnawed at her mind. He saw something in her that she could barely recognize in herself. He believed in her strength. He believed in her ability to lead. But what did that even mean anymore? Could she truly lead, or was she just clinging to a position that no longer belonged to her? She closed her eyes, trying to quiet the thoughts that swirled in her head, but it was impossible. The truth was, she was scared, terrified even. She had spent so many years holding on to the image of who she was before the accident, before the fall, before the whispers and pitying looks. It was easier to hold on to that version of herself. It was easier to keep pretending that she could still be the leader, the warrior, the princess her people had once revered. But now, all of that seemed so far away. Zara felt as if she were standing at the edge of a precipice, looking down into the unknown. If she let go of who she had been, if she embraced who she was now, would she still be the same person? Could she still be the leader her people needed? Or would she fade away into nothingness, just another casualty of a war that had taken so much from her? A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Zara turned toward it, startled by the sound. She hadn't expected anyone. But when the door opened, the soldier appeared in the doorway, his face calm but his eyes filled with concern. "Princess." "Zara," he said softly. "I thought you might need someone to talk to." Zara swallowed hard, trying to steady her racing heart. She had known he would come. She had known he wouldn't let her retreat into herself again. He had seen something in her that she had barely seen in herself. And in some strange way, it made her feel both relieved and vulnerable at the same time. "I'm not sure what to say," Zara admitted, her voice quiet. "I'm lost. I don't know who I am anymore." The soldier stepped into the room, his eyes softening as he moved closer. "You don't have to have all the answers right now," he said. "You don't have to know everything, but I believe in you. I see you, Zara, and I see more than just your scars." Zara looked away, feeling the weight of his words. She had heard them before, but they felt different this time. For so long, she had believed her scars defined her. They defined her weakness, her failure. How could anyone see beyond that? How could anyone see anything other than the broken princess she had become? "You say that you see more than my scars," Zara murmured. "But I don't know how to see beyond them. I don't know how to see beyond what I've lost." The soldier was silent for a moment, his gaze steady. "It's okay to grieve what you've lost," he said. "But you can't let it define you. We all face loss in different ways. It doesn't make you any less of who you are. You're still the same person, Zara, the same person who led an empire, and you can still lead. You just have to find a different way." Zara clenched her fists, the frustration building inside her. "I don't know if I can. I don't know how to move forward when everything is different. My people don't see me as their leader anymore. They see me as broken. Maybe they don't see you the way you want them to," the soldier said gently. "But that doesn't mean you're not capable. They might be waiting for you to see it yourself, to believe in yourself again, and I think you can." Zara looked at him, the vulnerability in her eyes clear. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that she could still be the leader, the person she had once been. But it felt impossible. She wasn't the same. She wasn't the strong princess who had once commanded armies. She wasn't the one who had led her people to victory. She was a broken version of that person, and the fear of never being able to return to who she had been gripped her heart. "I don't know how to do this," Zara whispered, the weight of her uncertainty crushing her. "I don't know how to move forward." The soldier stepped closer, his presence steadying her. "You don't have to do it alone," he said softly. "You're not alone anymore. You have people who believe in you, people who want to see you succeed, and I'm one of them." Zara's chest tightened, and she felt the tears she had been holding back finally spill over. She didn't know what the future held, and she didn't know if she could ever fully regain her strength. But in that moment, standing in the quiet of her chambers with the soldier by her side, Zara realized something. She didn't have to have all the answers. She didn't have to be perfect. She just had to keep going. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The decision. The morning sun crept through the heavy curtains of Princess Zara's chambers, casting long golden beams across the room. She had spent another sleepless night, her mind churning with the weight of the decision she had to make. The soldier's words still lingered in her thoughts, his belief in her a constant echo in her mind. But the fear that had settled deep within her heart remained, an unshakable presence that threatened to hold her back. Zara stood in front of the mirror once again, her crutches leaning against the wall beside her. She gazed at her reflection, tracing the lines of the scars on her face, the twisted metal of her leg, the remnants of a life that felt so far away. She had been strong once. She had led her people to victory, guided them through wars, and stood at the helm of a powerful empire. But now, she felt like a shadow of that person, lost in a world that had moved on without her. But the soldier had shown her something she hadn't allowed herself to see in years' hope. He had believed in her when no one else had. He had seen past the scars, past the disability, and into the heart of who she was. And now that belief burned within her, fighting against the fear that had held her captive for so long. She had a choice to make. Zara reached for her crutches and steadied herself, her breath steadying as she took a deep breath. She had always prided herself on her ability to make decisions, to take charge and lead. But now, everything seemed different. The stakes were higher. Her people were waiting for her. They had been waiting for her to return to them, to show them that she was still capable of leading. But could she really do that? Could she rise above the brokenness, the fear, and the uncertainty that held her prisoner? Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. Zara's heart skipped a beat, but she didn't need to be told who it was. The soldier had been there for her from the beginning. He had been her strength when she had none, her anchor in the storm. He had never judged her, never looked at her as anything less than the person she used to be. And now, he was here again. "Princess Zara," he called softly, his voice gentle but firm. "The council awaits your decision." Zara closed her eyes for a moment, gathering her thoughts. The council, they had summoned her once more, this time to decide the future of the empire. They were waiting for her to make her move, to show them that she was still capable of leading. The pressure was unbearable, the weight of it almost too much to bear. But she had to face it. She had to decide. Taking a final deep breath, Zara nodded to herself and opened the door. The soldier stood there, his expression unreadable but warm. "Are you ready?" he asked. Zara met his gaze, feeling the steadiness of his presence. For a moment, she wasn't the broken princess or the weak leader. She was just a woman who had been given a second chance. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew that she couldn't let fear dictate her choices anymore. "I'm ready," she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. The soldier smiled, his eyes full of understanding. "Stronger than you think," he said softly, stepping aside to let her pass. Zara walked down the long hallway toward the council chambers, her crutches clicking softly on the floor. With each step, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders. It wasn't gone entirely, but it was lighter. The decision was hers to make, and she would face it head-on. When she reached the council chambers, the large wooden doors creaked open before her, and she stepped inside. The room was filled with leaders, dignitaries from across the empire, all eyes on her as she entered. There was no turning back now. The weight of their gaze pressed on her shoulders, but she didn't falter. She stood tall, her crutches now forgotten, as she walked toward the central table where the council members sat. Princess Zara, the head of the council, spoke, his voice cold and formal. "We've been waiting for you. The time has come for you to make your decision. Will you return to the throne and lead us, or will you step aside and allow another to take your place?" Zara felt the weight of his words settle in her chest, but she didn't flinch. This was it. This was the moment she had been preparing. For the moment she had feared and hoped for in equal measure. She glanced at the faces around the table, some hopeful, some skeptical, but they were all waiting for her to decide. "I've spent too long hiding," Zara began, her voice steady as she spoke, though the emotions in her chest threatened to break through. "I've spent too long believing that my disability, my scars, would define me. But I've learned something in the past few days. I've learned that strength isn't about perfection. It's about rising, no matter how many times you fall. It's about standing up, even when the world tells you to sit down." She paused, gathering her courage, her heart pounding in her chest. "I will return to the throne. Not because I am perfect, but because I am ready to fight. I am ready to lead, not as the woman I once was, but as the woman I am now. I may not be the same, but I am still strong. And I will prove that to you." The council members exchanged glances, murmurs spreading through the room, but Zara didn't waver. She had made her decision. She had embraced who she was, scars and all. The head of the council cleared his throat, his face unreadable. "Very well," he said. "If you are truly ready, then we welcome you back, Princess Zara. Lead us and show us the strength we've been waiting for." Zara stood tall, the weight of her past no longer holding her back. For the first time in years, she felt the stirrings of something she had lost: hope, courage, and the belief that she was capable of more than she had ever imagined. The decision had been made, and now it was time to lead. New beginnings. The days that followed Zara's decision felt like the beginning of something new. Something she had long been too afraid to embrace. The council had reluctantly accepted her return, though there were whispers that still lingered. In the halls, the other leaders watched her closely, waiting to see if the broken princess could truly reclaim her place. But Zara wasn't concerned about their doubts anymore. She had stopped looking for validation in others. This journey wasn't about proving herself to anyone except for herself. The weight of leadership felt different now. It wasn't the same as before, when she had led with fire and unshakable confidence. Now, every step felt more deliberate, more conscious. She didn't rush to act or speak, but instead, she listened to the needs of her people and the desires of those around her. She had come to realize that leadership was not about forcing change, but about guiding others through it, even when that change was difficult and slow. One late afternoon, Zara found herself standing in the palace gardens. The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting a warm glow across the land. The flowers that had once seemed so vibrant and full of life now appeared to have weathered the seasons. Their colors muted, yet still beautiful in their quiet resilience. Zara took a deep breath, feeling the cool air fill her lungs. The silence of the gardens, the rustle of the leaves, the distant calls of birds, it all grounded her. Her leg, the one she had long hated, no longer felt like a prison. It was part of her now. And with that acceptance, she had found a new strength. A quiet strength that had nothing to do with the leg itself, but everything to do with the acceptance of who she had become. She was no longer the fearless princess who had led armies. She was something different, something more. And as much as it had taken time to realize, Zara finally understood that this was the version of herself she needed to be. A soft sound behind her broke her thoughts, and she turned to find the human soldier standing there. His posture relaxed, but his eyes still full of that same calm intensity. He had become her constant over the past few weeks, a source of unwavering support. In a world that had been so uncertain, he didn't look at her with pity or judgment. He saw her not as a broken leader, but as a woman who had the power to change her own fate. "You seem at peace," he said, his voice soft, yet filled with a quiet respect. Zara smiled, her gaze lifting to the sky, where the last rays of the sun were fading into twilight. "I am," she replied. "For the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." The soldier took a step closer, his eyes never leaving her. "You've come a long way," he said, his tone filled with admiration. "I know it hasn't been easy, but you've found your strength again. And I believe in you more than I ever have." Zara looked at him then, her heart swelling with gratitude. It was because of him in so many ways that she had found the courage to step back into the world she had once ruled. He had reminded her that her value wasn't in her past victories, her strength, or her ability to fight. It was in her resilience, her compassion, and her willingness to keep going despite the pain. "I couldn't have done it without you," she whispered, her voice full of sincerity. "You were the one who helped me see that I didn't have to be perfect to be strong, that it was okay to be vulnerable and still lead." He smiled, the warmth of it spreading through her. "You've always been strong, Zara. You just needed to believe it again." The silence between them stretched for a moment, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that came from mutual understanding to people who had been through something difficult. It had found a way to help each other heal. "Do you ever think about the future?" Zara asked, turning to face him fully. The soldier's gaze softened, and he nodded slowly. "I do, but I don't think about it with fear anymore. I think about it with hope. Hope for what we can build together. What you can build as the leader you've always been, just in a different way." Zara's chest tightened at his words. She had always been so afraid of the future, of the unknown. But now, for the first time, she was learning to embrace it. She was no longer bound by the past, no longer weighed down by the expectations of others or by her own insecurities. "I still don't know what the future holds," Zara admitted, her voice tinged with uncertainty, but also with resolve. "But I know one thing for sure. I'm not walking it alone anymore." The soldier stepped closer, his presence steady and reassuring. "You don't have to." Zara took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her decision settle comfortably on her shoulders. She was no longer the woman who had been discarded, cast aside by her people. She was no longer the broken princess who couldn't find her way. She was a new version of herself, one that had embraced her scars, her weaknesses, and her vulnerabilities. She was a leader, not because of her strength, but because of her willingness to rise despite her flaws. And as she looked out at the horizon, Zara realized that she wasn't just leading an empire. She was leading herself towards something new. She was building her future, not from the ashes of who she had been, but from the courage of who she had become. And in that quiet moment, with the sun setting on the world before her, she knew that this was only the beginning.